Thank you everybody for joining us this week for our coronavirus webinar for industry update. Thank you all of you that joined us on Monday or last Friday for reopening. We appreciate you coming back to us as your resource. I'm going to introduce Melissa Bova, but thank Dell Technologies for sponsoring these webinars each week. They're a great partner of ours. And with that, Melissa, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. For those of you, some of you are probably getting a little sick of me, since some of you are probably really sick of me because you saw me Friday, Monday, and today. But we will talk, obviously, reopening. We'll spend time on reopening. I know that's the name of the game, but for those of you who have not participated in my weekly brain dumps, I will also spend some time kind of talking about everything we know about everything that's happening as it relates to legislation, operations, and everything in between. And then, as always, I will do my best to answer as many, if not all, questions as when we get to the end of the webinar. So we do have a bunch of information, a bunch of updates today, and as always, a little bit of snark because we are now creeping up on 3 months in, and we're all getting a little tired. So let's go right to federal and complain a little bit about specifically two members of the U.S. Senate as it relates to paycheck protection changes. So the House last week overwhelmingly passed legislation, the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, 417 to 1. This legislation extends the P3 to 24 weeks. So your 8 weeks that you have right now, it would extend up to 24 weeks. And it changes the percentage requirements from 75-25 to 60-40. So it would give you a little bit more ability to spend money on items other than payroll, since we are all very familiar that we are not meeting 100% of our payroll that we had before COVID started. To that end, House passed it overwhelmingly. The Senate was planning and hoping to pass it overwhelmingly with what we like to call a unanimous consent vote, which is basically all of the Senate says, this is a really good idea, we should do it. Unfortunately, there are two members of the Senate that are saying that they don't think it's a good idea and that we're moving too quickly and that we really need to look at it a little bit more and not necessarily move forward. And that is Ron Johnson from Wisconsin and Mike Lee from Utah are the reason those of you who are frustrated with the P3 are not getting any relief right now. So there is a lot of pressure. Our state associations and our fellow states of Utah and Wisconsin are putting a lot of pressure on those senators, but without them agreeing to do that unanimous vote, we will need to wait for the full Senate to come back and put up a floor vote, and that has not yet been determined. So we were cooking with gas, and we seem to have hit a hard stop for the moment. The hope, of course, is that these two senators, due to what will probably be overwhelming pressure from the restaurants, will change their mind. Otherwise, we will need to bring in back the entire U.S. Senate to vote for logical changes that probably should have been voted on with unanimous consent, but I'm a little biased, I guess, in all of that. To that end, our friends in the Treasury have continued to put out guidance as it relates to forgiveness. That guidance is getting more complicated and more tedious, I feel, with every iteration of it. So PRLA did join a letter with the Pennsylvania Bankers Association, Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, community bankers, all of the bankers, along with all of the business groups, essentially sending a letter to Secretary Mnuchin saying, this is going to be too complicated to review. These applications are too difficult. We need to streamline the review process of the P3 to allow loan forgiveness to happen more easily. So that letter was sent to the Treasury. It does seem like every week we kind of take, or every few weeks we take, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. We feel like we're making progress, and then we get stopped there as well. So, of course, the hope is that Treasury will relax those. We will get some P3 relief, which is going to be key for all of you, and we will continue to put pressure on both of those fronts. And of course, as I mentioned in my update last week, there are lots of bills that are just bopping around all over the Hill right now regarding to tax credits for purchasing PPE, tax credits generally, relief funds, a relief fund in lieu of business interruption insurance, all of the things that we've been talking about continue to be bopping around the hill. But with the elections yesterday, things seem to have gotten stalled as people ran home to try and justify their reelection. So we will continue, and hopefully we'll make progress on that P3 front imminently, if not sooner. At this point, we have been in conversations with Senator Casey and Toomey's office. They're both planning to vote for the bill, so they're not the problem. It is those two senators from those two states that seem to be making us all lose a little bit of sleep at night. Let's talk about the primary election. We had a little bit of a hullabaloo this week, is how I would call it. Last week, Montgomery County basically filed a suit asking for them to allow mail-in ballots to be accepted after the date of the primary, and the court said, no, thank you, you can't do that. The governor said he could not make the decision to allow mail-in ballots to be sent or be received after the date of the election. And then, of course, and we'll touch upon this with everything that has been happening in many of our cities over the weekend, the governor announced on Sunday night that 5 counties would be able to have their mail-in ballots received after the fact, which just caused, once again, the consternation we're seeing from the state house and the state senate in terms of them asking the governor to communicate. He makes a decision. They claim they were not told ahead of time, and that it is a violation of election law, which the legislature has been charged to make those decisions. So we do have a number of races in those 5 counties that aren't entirely decided yet, because people do have time to get their ballots in before they have an extra week to do it in some of those counties: Allegheny, Erie, Philadelphia, Montgomery, and I might be missing one, but those are generally the counties. And I know all of you voted, because if our industry is not politically active now with everything that's been going on, I don't know what else to do to get you politically active. Philadelphia is the only one so far that we've seen some races flip. Senator Larry Farnese seems to have lost to a socialist running against him, which means that seat will not become Republican. It will become socialist, which I guess could still be considered a Democrat. I haven't yet gone down that rabbit hole. And it looks like Maria Donatucci has also lost her reelection in Philadelphia, and Brian Sims is on his way to losing his reelection. So Philadelphia is trending more left as the primary election continues. In Montgomery County, with ballots still coming in, Senator Leach is trailing for his reelection. So we'll see how that goes. Of course, there has been some drama with that seat and the senator in the past, but that has not yet been determined if he's lost. So this primary election is really going to build up the future of our industry in November. So please continue to pay attention to my weekly updates and the daily updates in terms of what's going on and how you need to engage, at least as it pertains to political activity and what our industry needs. State of the legislature. For the first time, I think since March, the legislature is not in session, which has been a little nice for me. They did pass a budget last week, $25.1 billion. I talked about this a little bit on my update last week. Part of that budget does contain funding to 60 counties that did not receive their CARES Act funding directly. It allows them to create grants for emergency services, but also to create small business grants for businesses impacted by COVID. So that was part of the state budget package, was that some of this CARES Act money, $3.1 billion, kind of disseminating to 60 counties that haven't received any funding yet. To that end, the budget does contain only $1.7 million for tourism. So we will continue to bang the drum in terms of the fact that if we are going to get people in your restaurants and in your hotels that are not living in your counties, we really need to start bumping up that tourism spend when we're ready to reopen and welcome people back to the industry. On the CARES Act piece funding as well, we are working with some legislators on some grant programs for small restaurants. There seems to be desire within the legislature to develop some type of program there. We're also looking at a grant program using some of the CARES Act funding for our destination marketing organizations to create a grant funding program there. All of this is very preliminary. $1.3 billion of the CARES Act money has not been spent. So that's really what we're eyeing on in terms of some of the recovery packages that we're going to need for our industry specific. Unemployment compensation. A few updates on that front. And we could spend an entire webinar on unemployment. I know we can, and just, complaints generally about the system. But relief of charges letter. Many of you are probably receiving that letter. Relief of charges have been delayed due to the COVID crisis. So you will not have any charges assessed for your employees as of right now that are collecting unemployment. Apparently the unemployment system doesn't know how to turn off the automatic sending of those letters. Nothing, I guess, is as easy as clicking a button. So some of you are receiving those letters. There's nothing that you need to do with them. They're automatic. They aren't supposed to go out, but they weren't able to stop them. So if you receive that letter that says you have to petition for relief of charges, if you have laid your employees off related to COVID, you do not need to do that. And if you feel like you want to do something on the back, I forget what number it is, but there is a reason that's due to a disaster or a natural disaster, and that is what you would pick if you want to mail something back to the unemployment office. But you do not need to do anything on that front. Another piece of legislation for my friends who are on my government affairs committee, I already sent this to you. We are having, and we've talked about this in the past, part of the conundrum of the P3 is that for you to get loan forgiveness, you have to get back to the number of employees that you had before. And if your employees refuse to come back, that won't be held against you. But then, of course, they stipulated that you need to turn them into the state unemployment office if they refuse to come back. And we are not quite sure how the unemployment office is going to view different reasons as it pertains to COVID for being eligible for unemployment or not eligible for unemployment. So House Bill 2557, which might start moving next week, just delineates that. It says these are reasons why somebody can stay on unemployment. They have health issues related to COVID. It stipulates that if they just say, I am scared, I don't want to, that's not a reason to not come back to work. So it actually will be giving the Department of Labor and Industry the items that they need and don't, that would be permissible or not permissible as it relates to unemployment for COVID. So this is going to be hopefully something that will streamline that process as it pertains to this. I will say for your employees that are saying, I like my extra $600 a week and life is grand and I don't want to come back, that will not last forever. As of right now, that will continue to run out at the end of July. And they might not have a job to return to at that point in time. But UC Form 1921 is the form that you need to fill out for those people that are refusing to come back to work. You do need to fill that out and send it to the unemployment office for your relief under the P3. Okay, let's have some sad chat, and then we'll go to reopening, which I don't think is sad, but I guess it just depends on where you are in terms of reopening. We had a weekend would be a way to describe it, and many of you, especially those in Philadelphia, have had a terrible weekend, and even across the state in Pittsburgh. I know Lancaster, I know Allentown, Bethlehem. We had a lot of protests, whether you agree with the reason the protests happen or not. I think they certainly speak to an underlying problem within the country that needs to be addressed. Don't necessarily think destroying of small businesses is the right answer, but frustration is frustration. But to that end, the governor has stated that the state will be providing relief to some of those cities and municipalities and businesses that were impacted. So we'll be continuing to work with the state to provide that relief. I know Philadelphia finally seems to be settling down a little bit. And if your business, of course, was impacted, please let us know, and we will continue to advocate to get you the help that you needed. Of course, the timing couldn't have been worse for the industry in all of this. So we certainly hope that we will be able to move on from this. And of course, like I said, the state said that they will be providing relief, especially in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, because they seem to be the two hardest hit cities in the Commonwealth. So we do have some legislation moving in Philadelphia. The one we hope that will be a template for many of you in other municipalities that are having this issue, third-party delivery. For those of you that are having issues with your third-party delivery services, the Philadelphia legislation kind of takes three different fronts. It requires an agreement between you and the third-party delivery company, or if you don't have an agreement, they need to disclose to the guests that they do not have an agreement with the restaurant, just to inform the guests that if they place an order, they're not guaranteed to get that order just because of the fact that that delivery company has no form of agreement with the restaurant. Second to that, it requires a disclosure of fees. So if they're going to charge 30, 40%, that will have to be disclosed to the customer as opposed to, you know, the information that's sent to the restaurant after the fact. And then third, in Philadelphia, they will be capping delivery fees as well, just over the state of the crisis. So it would be during the state of emergency. And then 90 days following that, there'd be a cap on delivery fees. And I know that this is something many of you across the state have been speaking about. We certainly hope that this will act as a template to be used in other places and hopefully a template to be used at the state level as well. Also in Philadelphia, there will be legislation expanding outdoor seating. We believe and know the mayor's office can do it on his own, but it certainly doesn't hurt to get a large amount of council also agreeing that it should be done. So that will be introduced in Philadelphia this week. And of course, for all of you in local places, regarding your local elected officials, if you want to engage on any of these, please reach out and we will certainly work with you to do that. All right, let's get to reopening. Yay. So we've had two really in-depth webinars on Friday and Monday. And it's just really like a storm coming through. It got really dark here. On Friday and Monday, that did a deep dive. I'm not going to deep dive again because we do not have an hour and a half. I'm going to tell you, review a few things, tell you what we know, what we've gotten clarification on, and some other things from there. So June 5th, that is this Friday. Everybody will be going to yellow if they're not in yellow, except for Philadelphia. Philadelphia, I would anticipate right now might not be going to yellow on Friday. Even if you do go to yellow, the mayor has said outdoor dining will not be permitted yet. But for the rest of you, outdoor dining will be able to begin on Friday. And we talked about all of the things you can and can't do relating to outdoor dining. Some things that we know and don't know, and I don't think John is here yet. I know John wanted to speak to a few things, but I will do my best to fill in until he arrives. We shared with you all the guidance that we know. And a lot of it we are still fleshing out. A lot of it the governor's office is still really fleshing out. And we've certainly provided to all of you what we think we know in terms of interpreting some of the guidance that is out there. So we have delineated that. I know that we have an infographic that we'll be sharing that will also go into some of the things that you can and can't do. And then of course, in terms of the catering piece, we have gotten again from the governor's office, 250 is that number. That number is not going to change for indoor events, at least not during dull green or regular green, however we want to call it. Few things that we have heard from the governor's office that will be clarified, and some of them I did talk to you last week, but we've reconfirmed. You will be able to use those dividers between booths. So if you have booths, you do not need to have them 6 feet apart. You can put dividers there. There is no height requirement, but the general gist is make sure the dividers are about the height of a tall person that would be standing next to the booth. So we will figure out how tall John Longstreet is and we'll send you those measurements. That will probably get you above and beyond how high your barriers need to be. So we have confirmed that. That should be put into the guidance this week. And for all of you that just were devastated about the no growler refill situation, apparently they will be allowing you to refill growlers in yellow as well. So that is a change that's coming. One change that we are making progress on is that 12 people per 1,000 square foot nightmare that has really been causing a lot of confusion for all of you. We expect clarification that if you have a fire code will be the standard, so that 50% of what your fire code is going to be, that will be the standard for your indoor dining. So if you're 150, 75 is your number, the 12 per 1,000 will not be the standard for your indoor. Outdoor, we are working on it. We have, oh, there we go. There's Eric. So there's our storm that's making my house dark. Second part for outdoor seating, we believe social distancing is the number. If that's not the number, that 12 per 1,000 will be increased to a higher number. But we think social distancing is going to be the way to go in terms of outdoor dining. And we're having those conversations with the governor's office. So I will say for right now, please continue to do social distancing. That's going to be your number one box that you need to check. When people come in, they need to see that everything's 6 feet apart. They need to know that you're spacing people out as they're waiting for their tables, all of that. The LCD extension of premise. I will say it again, and I know those of you that participated in my webinar on Monday, I repeated it like 6 times because all this weekend I was getting follow-up emails about it. Today, potentially within the next 40 minutes, that application will be open to extend your premise. Don't go to their website yet, but within the next 40 minutes, we believe it will be announced at the board meeting that they're having right now, and that application will be available today for you to extend your your premise. So please stay tuned. We will email that out. It will be on social media. We will get all of that out to you. That's kind of, because I know I'm getting a lot of questions, so I didn't go too much down into the rabbit hole of reopening, because I know I'm going to get those questions at the end. And with that, I think I'm going to talk about some upcoming webinars and some other items as well. I will let Hope talk about some of the other things that are coming up, but I'm going to make this pitch again if you didn't notice it before. On tomorrow, 6/4, there is a wage and hour webinar. I mentioned this last week. This is the Families First Paid Leave Act that you all need to follow. And like I said last week, many of you were not operating or having employees when this was first passed, so you weren't thinking about it, but this is a federal law that you need to be compliant with. So please register for that webinar tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's from the Department of Labor, the Federal Department of Labor. So everything they tell you, you can take it to the bank because they're going to be the enforcers of this. So please register for that if you haven't yet. I mentioned it before, I'll say it again. I can't save you if Scalia comes after you on behalf of the Department of Labor. There's not much we can do there. So please register for that and make sure you're compliant. And then Hope, do you want to speak to some of the reopening guidance? Because I know we're getting a lot of questions now from people wanting to know what they need to do to reopen or to sanitize and all of that.
Sure. I mean, you can see the 2 webinars that are up there for ServSafe. Please make sure to get yourself onto one of those, at least register, because they will send you a recording of what they're going over so that you'll have this for a reference if you can't make it at those times. Yesterday, we had ServPro present about reopening and cleaning best practices. That's up on our website. Please check that out. He gave some really great information, and they're available for you to give a call if you have questions regarding that. Ecolab is doing a weekly, we don't have it up here, but tomorrow they're doing one, I believe at 11 a.m. It's on our website. They're doing a weekly Food Safety 101 best practices cleaning throughout your different parts of your establishments. So please check that out. They also do send you a recording. So a lot of these, if you just get yourself registered, you're going to get the recording if you cannot make it to the particular webinar. We're going to continue to have more webinars in the upcoming weeks, just working through some of that. And with that, that's all I have for that. Eric, do you want to go to the next slide? Because I probably could take that for John. Again, we're working with our HARP Relief Fund. Exciting news, we got money out this week to some of our first recipients, and they're very thankful. We're continuing to work through those applications to get the money out to these individuals. One of our fundraising items is the Cheers PA. Please check that out. It's got some really great things on there. $20 to get enrolled, get your name in the auction for the different items. Stratus Lounge will also be doing their Instagram DJ event tomorrow. And with that, I mean, I guess just to reiterate the resources we have there, we continue to update it with additional things. We have put some information out there from Ecolab, and we're going to update some information from Cisco about cleaning sources. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Melissa. I think you've probably gotten through a few of the questions.
I have, and I was just scrolling through. We have Chris Sirianni. We're just honored to have you joining us today. I haven't seen you on the list in a while. I was just looking to see who's on today. I see we have some people from some of our partner operations in Harrisburg. This is exciting. All right, let's get to some questions. We do have a question that is for the group. I don't know if we have anybody that's currently operating in yellow or green, but we do have a question, or actually just green, from Michael Leifer. Does anyone actually have experience using disposable products such as tablecloth, plating, and flatware? Mainly looking information as to whether guests prefer disposables or just thoroughly cleaned reusable tableware. So if anybody is currently operating in green and can speak to that, I know Michael would very much appreciate it.
I think actually Susan had responded to him a little bit further down.
Oh, great. Okay.
So there should be an answer as you scroll down.
Looking forward to green, light green, and phase out. Has the PRLA been able to start pushing for TV ads or social media ads to promote dining out and tourism overnight stays? If no, when will this process start? This team will seem open to promoting general consumer spending. Well, I mean, this is part of what we're looking at for the CARES Act funding, is to use that for promotion and dedicating some of that to our destination marketing organizations. We seem to have lost some of the tourism funding that we had before, but we certainly hope that by using some of the CARES Act funding to our destination marketing organizations, that's going to drive people back into traveling and spending, of course, when the time comes, which we hope will be sooner than later. And John Longstreet has joined us. I did my best to channel my, John, just so you know, I said for the height, for the booth, I said a tall man, so we're gonna need how tall you are, so we can use that as the basis for the booth barrier height.
Okay, I'll measure my upper body height and send that all out to everyone.
We do have UC form 1921 is the form you need to fill out if people do not want to come back to work.
Melissa,
yes.
Really quick on the promoting dining and tourism. I think the National Restaurant Association is going to be starting a media push. And John, I don't know if you want to speak to it. I sat through the webinar yesterday about that. It seems like they're putting money behind this kind of a push too nationally.
They are, and just very briefly, the state restaurant associations, of which there's a federation of all of them, all 52, worked with the NRA on the concept that we should be spending some of the money they have, and they have a good amount of funding to promote coming back to restaurants and welcoming people back in a safe fashion. Not unlike, if you remember, very early in this tragic pandemic, when DoorDash put out a commercial saying we're open for delivery. And it was a really good, feel-good commercial. It was maybe the first weekend that we were all closed and everyone was so devastated. And so it'll be a feel-good commercial about how we're doing everything we can to welcome folks back safely. It will be a national campaign. And thanks for bringing that up, Hope. That's coming shortly.
Okay, there you go. You mentioned a 250 cap on indoor events. Is there a different cap or number of people for outdoor open space events? Not that has been announced yet, but we have been getting whispers from the governor's office that in green, outdoor events can operate at 50% of what their capacity would be. Now, for things like fairs where you can't really regulate the number of people there, we need a significant amount of guidance there. I know John was just on a hearing, so I'm going to let him speak to that for a minute. But we do expect for kind of amusement parks or attractions, 50% in green is going to be your capacity. And John, I don't know if you want to speak to anything that happened on the tourism hearing that you participated in today.
Yeah, the House Tourism Committee, Chairman Millard and Chairman Longetti and the committee held a hearing, and it was mostly geared towards theme parks and fairs, attractions, and trying to help them get reopened. And the comment was made by a couple of the large parks, theme parks, that they had received confirmation that it's 50% of capacity for the park, but that if they had an event inside of the park, such as a concert or a show or something like that, that would be regulated by the 250 in that particular part of the park. So that was confirmed on the call today by a couple of the different attractions But we haven't had any direct conversation with the governor's office about that. And as Melissa correctly said, there's a challenge, and the head of the Fair Association was on the call too. She said she doesn't have any guidance on fairs in that regard as of yet. So that's what came out of it to answer that question.
Okay, so for booth partitions, did you say a partition height needs to be the height of a tall person standing on the ground or sitting in the booth? My assumption, John, is standing on the ground.
It's actually sitting in the booth.
Oh, sitting in the booth. Oh, that's even better.
So if you sit down in the booth, it has to come up to the top of the person's head that is a tall person. And I'm not saying like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar tall or anything like that, but maybe you take 6'2", 6'5", like my height, and you sit down there and you leave, and it doesn't hurt to make it a couple inches taller. You can't just take an existing booth that happens to look like it's tall and say this is okay. You're gonna have to put some sort of partition in. When we spoke about this last night with the governor's office, I specifically said, do you want to be more prescriptive and put a height in? He said, no, I'd rather have people use common sense. And if it comes up to the height of the person's head sitting at the booth that covers a tall person, we're going to be okay with it. So for those of you that like the T's crossed and the I's dotted, some of the things they're not going to do that because they don't want to be overly prescriptive in the way the regulations are written. There's both positives and negatives to that.
Okay, let's see. Is the Serve Safe webinar link available on the PRLA website? Hope the answer is yes.
Sorry, I was just looking to see if it was on there, and I'm not seeing it there, but I will make sure to get Steph to put it up there.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No,
Okay.
it's there. Sorry to interrupt. It's there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at it and I don't see it on there. Okay.
Refresh your page, please.
Okay, let's see. Catering, I knew you were going to hit me with something, Maggie. Catering, banquet facility, wedding, private function, clarifications, any movement on this? The current language specifically mentions that regardless of status of reopening, that dance floors are prohibited, which is devastating to try holding weddings events in the immediate future. John, do you want to speak to that one?
It's on my list. Melissa gave me an assignment yesterday, and I haven't got that one done yet. But we're on almost daily communication, Maggie. So I'll keep working on it. We were trying to get a couple other things resolved last night, but I'll stay on it. And Melissa, believe me, is a great taskmaster, so you can count on her.
I even printed out the list of tasks I gave John, so I would have them handy if he forgot. So we're on it. Are disposable utensils required? They are not required. Even in yellow, you do not need to use disposable utensils. Now you can choose to, as we talked about before, if that makes your guests feel safer or if that makes you feel safer, but they are not required. And to speak to that point, we could try and tell the governor's office, we want really clear yes, no, maybe. But the fact that they're not does give you a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you're operating. If you are a fine dining establishment and they say that you need to use plastic utensils that you can throw away, that's an issue. So you have the decision to use whatever is going to make the most sense for your operations. What can we actually preset? There is nothing saying that you can't preset. Now in yellow, you can't have condiments or anything like that out on the table. Would you want to think about not presetting just because you would have, the salad or the dessert on the table ahead of time? Something you want to think about, but there's nothing in the guidance delineating that. And John's going to take care of dance floors. That's a personal one for me, so he's going to take care of that one. Assume a private event outdoors in the yellow phase.
Can I go back to dance floors for a minute, Melissa? I just want to make clear that I think the only chance we have on this is to have dance floors be permitted for what would be defined as a private event, which will cover maybe 90% of the need. But if you operate a public dance hall, I think that's going to be a tough sell because of the nature of the way the virus works. But if we say it's a private event, like a wedding, like a bar mitzvah or something else that you might do, that in that case, the guest list is controlled and so on and so forth. So that's going to be the argument on it. I think we have a good chance, but I don't know for sure what's going to happen. We're working on it.
Okay. Assume a private event outdoors in the yellow phase. I feel like this, I'm like getting into math questions. Party wants 3 tables seating 8 each, 20 people total, so under the 25 max for a yellow private event. Question, does the 6 foot between tables shoulder to shoulder still apply, or is that eliminated because it's a private event not exceeding 25 people and they have all consented to be together in a private event? They still have to be 6 feet apart, the tables. Even in a private event, they need to be 6 feet apart. So that's the, like I said, the 250, 50% social distancing standard that's in place. Do you have anything to add there, John?
I'm gonna ask you the question, Melissa. There may be a little bit of a glitch in this would be that if it's a private event, less than 25 people, outdoors in yellow, and it's because it's private, that it's related parties, not relatives, but related parties. Could they have, if they wanted to set up one large banquet style table for 25, could they do that?
Technically, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I mean, and like I said, it is kind of, the problem is that the 25 is congregating, but in the restaurant guidance, they're not delineating between public and private. And that's where we're running into these issues with private events, especially because the governor's office is saying the standards that are in place for public apply to private. Where do our employees apply to get money out of HARP? Hope, that is a you question.
Currently, the application process is closed. We had our first round go through about 2-3 weeks ago with 1,000 applicants accepted. If we reopen, we will let everybody know, but we have a fair amount of applicants that we are working through with the current funding we have. So it's dependent on funding to see if we reopen.
Okay. Can we start doing private tours of our banquet facility? We do not have a restaurant. We are a banquet facility only. I am going to say yes, because you are not providing food or drink in that scenario. I would not provide service. So if you're giving them a taste test or anything like that, that would not be permitted. But I would submit that you would be okay in that scenario because you are not providing food and drink. That was a hard one, Ron. Okay. I apologize if this was already discussed. Can you provide an update on the PLCB Plus portal for licensees to apply for outdoor dining? It should be available, and I keep on looking at my phone, and I know that my friend was on this webinar earlier. It should be available today. So once it's available, we will get it out. Again, do not apply until it is available. Last communication I got about 40 minutes ago was that that application will be available today for you to apply for. I would presume, like I said, and as it's written here, via PLCB Plus. We will tell you as soon as it is available. We are super stocking that one. Are photo booths allowed at private events? John and I have differing opinions on this one. So I would say the problem with photo booths is that it could be considered entertainment, and they're not allowing kind of entertainment to take place in terms of arcades. Not saying a photo booth is an arcade. I think they should be allowed that, in addition to the dance floors, that private events should be held to a different standard than public events. But as of right now, the governor's office is not delineating between the two. Could you have an argument for photo booths? Probably, as long as you're socially distancing and as long as it's a private event. But on its face, if it could be considered an arcade game or a video game or something that people could participate in, that's a no. And dance floors continue to be a no. Specific guidance on weddings. I'll say it again. They aren't delineating right now between restaurant guidance, public restaurant guidance, and private events. And John, trust me, John called me this morning. We regrouped again. We hope that they do. Right now, they seem to think that the guidance that is out there is okay for this current moment. We are putting together guidance that we will be providing them specific to private events and catered events, recognizing the fact that it is a restricted, smaller group of people that you can control. But as of right now, there is nothing specific to private catered events regarding your operations. They're saying everything that's out there for restaurant operations applies to those events as well. No dance floors. No dance floors at all. Anything where people are congregating, especially because they specifically said dance floors, would not be allowed. People are trying to make public space available for people to take out food and dine outside in private parking lots, with the same spacing at the table and between tables apply that are being required by restaurants. Yes, social distancing needs to be applied between tables no matter what. Even if it's not on the restaurant property, even if it's outdoors, you really need to be applying that social distancing piece. Any movement on whether tables of 10 in a banquet room need to be 6 feet apart, or do the people at the party need to be 6 feet apart to follow social distancing? John and I talked about this morning. John, do you want to tackle that one, or you want me to?
The tables need to be, it's a kind of a shoulder to shoulder rule, not between people, but between tables. So the shoulders of someone at one table have to be 6 feet from the shoulders of someone at another table. But if you have, I think you said tables of 10, you want 10 people at a table, they don't have to be social distance at the table.
Okay, outdoor venue, private event, are masks required for both staff and guests? Regarding restaurant rules, guests need to wear their masks until they sit down at their table. So anytime a guest is not at their table, they need to be wearing a mask. Employees should also be wearing masks at all times, unless there's a health problem or it impedes on the employee's ability to do their job. So yes, they are saying masks at all times. Like I said, please don't get arrested because you put somebody like in a chokehold because they're not wearing a mask. But you should be informing guests that they need to be wearing masks. Regarding the banquet tours, should we do by appointment only? We don't. Yes, definitely by appointment only for those tours. You just really need to control everything. And like I said, it seems like some of these things are above and beyond, but if we don't continue to see the number counts go down, the longer we are going to be in dull green. So please, by appointment only. You don't have to take reservations for your restaurant, but it's encouraged that you do to encourage, people not congregating, trying to wait for a table. So really put some thought into how you're going to operate in terms of that. My paycheck protection loan is up on Tuesday. If I don't use it all, which guidelines will I fall under? We believe that, well, we're hoping that the Senate will pass something this week. We believe that it will be backdated. So if your P3 ends, the standards that would be used under the new bill would apply, but we can get clarification on that in terms of what would apply and what would not. Like I said, the Senate should have voted on it, and then this would be a moot point, but that's a conversation for another day. Yeah, and I will say this, I get it. I'll say it again. We know the private event thing is frustrating and annoying. We get it. But I mean, to be honest, 250 is a higher number than I think we thought we were going to get. We know that there still needs to be strides there. We're continuing to have those conversations. I think, unfortunately, the entire nature of a private event of people coming together and being close is what is giving the governor's office a lot of anxiety right now in terms of allowing that. And we are having those conversations in those counties. We might not see some of these changes we want until normal green. I don't know, but John, trust me, John is banging the drum on this. We're going to be submitting new guidelines, updated guidelines of how we think your private events can function. If I could change it, I would. And I know every day the messages are getting angrier, and I am equally as frustrated. But we are continuing to push on all of those fronts.
Melissa, every time that we bring up an example of why it should be changed, they bring up an actual anecdote about where there was a huge problem because they allowed it. As an example, that in I think it was Southeast Georgia, became the epicenter because of a funeral gathering, which was essentially a private event. In Boston, the Bio Conference was the epicenter of the outbreak in Boston because they had more than 250 people there. So every time we go through this, then there's some other example that comes out, and their number one focus, as you clearly understand, is to try to prevent the the virus from getting worse, coming back again, worse than it is. So that's the challenge we run into, and we'll keep working with them. And I will say that at least they listen to the arguments and seem to carefully consider them. And that's been, frankly, a blessing in many ways. Not in every way, but we're a lot better off than we might have been had that not been the case.
Bob has all of my phases of green that I've been referencing over the past few days. I don't know how many phases of green there are. There could be 8 phases. I need to get like the 120 Crayola crown box and figure out how many greens are in there. So I'm hoping it's only 2, maybe 3 phases, but I think I'm sticking firm to like dull green at this point for the phase that we're in right now. What is the general opinion on whether establishments should work off of a reservation only to cut down on crowding, waiting for a table, versus offering a more organic seating process with social distancing, obviously? I realize this is an opinion question, but just wanted some thoughts since we're aiming to open this weekend. We are in a green county. We've seen it both ways. I mean, we've seen people that are doing reservations and actually they're doing like bulk seating. So they're saying we are going to have reservations available at 3 o'clock, 4:30, 6 o'clock, 7:30, and then they fill the seats that way. We have seen people that are saying just reservations generally. We have seen reservations. We've seen other people that have said if you get there and you get a seat, then you get a seat, and if you don't, then you have to wait, which I think for some people that might have a crowd of people might not be the way to go. I don't think it hurts if you can utilize a reservation system to control the crowd of people. I don't think it's a terrible idea. For meetings at classroom or theater, would that also be 6 feet between attendees? I asked John this question yesterday, and our understanding is yes, that for a classroom or theater, 6 feet between each individual would need to be utilized. Yes, I know it doesn't make any sense that you can do a 10 top and they don't need to be separated, and that theater seating, they have to be. I get it. That is on our list of gripes. Are you trying to get any more grants for small business since our paycheck protection load is over already? Yes. At the federal and state level, we are working on grant programs. So please stay tuned as we work through all of that. And I said grant, we don't need another loan. I know we all don't need another loan. With all the rioting going on, what is the likelihood of a complete shutdown for 2 weeks across the board and the National Guard coming in until everything ends? I can't predict, but it does seem like things are starting to calm down. And Philadelphia is where, I mean, we have over 150 of our restaurants that have been devastated or going from windows blocked out to being burned to the ground in Philadelphia. That's where it was by far the worst. I think it's starting to simmer down now, so I do not expect a shutdown, at least not on that front. Now, I also I expect possibly a surge in cases 2 weeks from now. I don't think that's going to lead to a statewide shutdown, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a case number jump in 2 weeks. Once in the green, are we able to open buffets and coffee stations that are self-serve? Yes. According to the governor's guidance, the restriction on self-serve and buffets is only in yellow. So when you're in green, you have the ability to do that. Again, think about your guests, maybe ask your guests, figure out what's the best path forward there in terms of your buffet or self-serve station operations. I will give it another moment in case I get any other questions. This might be the earliest I'm wrapping up for one of these. I'm probably going to jinx it.
Well, we have been talking to them a lot lately.
But
Yeah, we have been doing a lot of webinars like this.
you guys should get a week off from me when we're done today. So you get a week to recover from my chatter.
One more question about cookie tables.
Does that apply to cookie tables too? I would call them a buffet. I know how important the cookie tables are out west. I get it. So yeah, I would say that a cookie, but I would be careful on that. I mean, have servers there, make sure that people aren't just grabbing with their hands. I would try and take some steps there, but I would call that a buffet. So I would say in green, that would be permissible. They'll do that in yellow. When is the next time the House or Senate will vote on the Paycheck Protection Program extension? Senate might be back this week. They have to. The problem is that unless we can convince those 2 senators to support a unanimous approval of the bill passed by the House, which is the cleanest way, they're going to have to bring back the full Senate for a vote. And that's going to take more time. So could be this week, possibly next week. Obviously, I think it should have happened yesterday, but that's going to be based on them bringing people back into DC. Aw, thank you. Thank you, Sue and Michael. Michael always says thank you. And Tom. We're trying. We really are trying.
As always, we will have a recording of this up. I am working to transcribe the 2 reopening webinars, and then we'll work on this one so we can get some frequently asked questions up there for that. And
Thanks, Hope.
Can I go have a Tito's too?
Hey,
it's close.
but Melissa, did you talk at all about
Thanks, Ron.
best practices for restaurants opening in green?
Have we talked about it today?
Yeah.
No, just because we've talked about it so much at the last 2.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say, if I may, just a moment before we close, this last Friday was the first day that restaurants were open in certain parts of the state. And I visited the Selinsgrove area, which was open, and there were a number of restaurants open there, maybe 20% of the restaurants. And they were using some very creative ways within the regulations to be able to do good, decent volumes. For example, you can't have waiting areas in the lobby now where people used to wait for tables, so they sat tables there. And they were able to do so and still fit in the 50% capacity and social distancing. So they were able to do more revenue than they expected they could do by being very careful on how they set up the restaurant. They spent weeks getting it set up where they could get the maximum number of tables. Also had a number of restaurants that have set up tables and found out that if they set it up with proper social distancing, they're right at their 50% capacity of the fire marshal code. And then some are greater. They can set up more than that, and obviously they have to stick with it, and some are less. But you have to look at your setup and find ways to maximize your ability to generate revenue. I would say if you're doing takeout, stick with takeout because you're going to need that revenue for a while if you can accommodate both, and then expand your hours of operation so you can feed more people. People were so thrilled just to get back out. This particular restaurant had a 95% satisfaction rating the first day they were open, which is unheard of on any day. And it's because people are so eager to get back out and get out for dinner. So just think this through. And I've heard people say, well, I can't make money at 50%. I'm not going to open. I would suggest that you at least give it some thought and think it through and try to be very creative in making it work for you. Thanks, Melissa.
Okay, well,
Thanks, Melissa.
Ron said I could have a Tito's, so I'm going to go get a Tito's now.
Great. Well, that concludes our webinar today. We appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be back next Wednesday. The webinars we've been talking about, the information for registering is up on our website and the archives are right below it. And with that said, I hope everybody has a good rest of the week.
Bye. See you next week.